Okay. I'd like to call to order the Oconee County Board of Zoning Appeals meeting this November 27th, 2017. Oh, were you pointing at Bill? Were you trying to get my attention or just pointing?
Pointing at the screen.
Oh, okay. On the first order, we have an agenda in front of us. It's been suggested that we interchange items 5 and 6 to move 6 up into the 5 position so that we can hear the case first and then talk about the staff update after that. Can I get a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded to move the agenda item number 6 instead of item number 5 and reverse the two. Any discussion? Okay, please vote by, if you're in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passed. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes for October 23rd, 2017 meeting. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes as stated?
I move the minutes be accepted as written.
I have a second.
Second.
All in favor, any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand of accepting the minutes as stated. Thank you. Motion passed. The next item on the agenda is public comment for non-agenda. Is there anybody that would like to speak? I guess no one has signed up, right, Bill?
Just our app.
Right, we don't have any non-agenda. Okay. All right, the next item would be to actually hear the setback variance request for application VA 17-000010 at 348 Northport Bass Drive in Fairplay, South Carolina. Tax parcel ID number 334-03-03-009. What?
Ours says 02-02.
Oh, really? We have the wrong number?
I'm sorry?
Is it 0303 or is it 0202? There was some question about, because in the,
Well, this one over here is 0202.
Let me take a quick look at that.
I guess the one that was sent out.
I'm showing 0202, but
It's
the name,
0202.
Okay, so it is 0202 based on the variance.
I'm showing 0202 on the
Okay.
information submitted.
It just on the agenda that I had, it had 0303, but so that should be 0202.
That's an error. And original agendas that were sent to you guys were numbered incorrectly too, so I think I may have provided you with a revised version of that, or a copy today. You can take a look and see if your numbering is correct on there.
Right, on what you handed out.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so,
But I think that number is correct.
so the statement of matter before the board, so the number has changed, it should be corrected to 0202 and then dash 09. So, Bill, we now have the statement of matter before the board. Is there?
Okay. Chair, Mr. Chairman, case, this case is a request for a variance of 2.5 feet off a side property line for a new single-family building that's under construction. construction at 348 North Fort Bass Drive in Fairplay, Mount Sutherland, County. The property is in the Fort Bass subdivision. The site already contains a parcel of mobile home, and recently the applicant needed a building permit to construct the home. The residence is under construction. But during that period, it was discovered that the building penetrated the 5-foot setback requirement for the construction in that area. It is a control-free district, but as you know, control-free districts have setbacks, and it's a 5-foot setback there. There are no, also there's no HOA there, so there's no private restriction involving that particular. And it was discovered, also there's a 16-inch overhang from the main structure as well, I might mention. This the problem was recognized when the property owner nearby called our attention to it. Stop order was issued on the project until this could be resolved. That's why we're here tonight for the applicant to request this variance to allow construction to continue as long as this situation, stop order remains in effect, but there are penalties involved either because it's process here. It's a small lot, as you can see from the picture. We're aware of the standards for variances that are listed in the staff report. Unnecessary hardship, and the primary four issues that come into play in the review process: extraordinary and exceptional conditions, etc. And I'll let the can continue on down that track as you go forward with the request. There's also attached a be sure it's attached. I have my mic over here. There's also attached a site plan that was done to reflect approximately where the structure is relative to the side lot line that's in question. We also attached the building permit application and another parcel map from the assessor's office to show you the area and the subdivision. After that, there's some photographs that show you the area, and one of these photographs is of the applicant sort of showing, measuring the sideline. I'm not sure that's terribly helpful in terms of the applicant, in terms of the view, but you can kind of see the area. Since that application, we've had some correspondence that's come in from property owners in the area that are, I think all of that's attached to your packet. One of those is from Mr. Charles Dabb at 352 North Fort Bass Drive, who appears to not support the variance request, and you can read the rationale there. There is another email that was sent from the property owner who owns the lot next to the lot in question. This is the gentleman who made the original complaint about the encroachment. But in this email, you'll notice that he has indicated he wishes to drop his complaint and is now in favor of granting the variance. Also have a third email at the back of the packet from Eddie Maddox and Kirsty Maddox, property owners in that area who are supportive of the applicant's request. That's all I have.
Okay. Now is the opportunity for the applicant to make your comments. If you'd come to the podium and then state your name, please.
My name is Vladimir Grabenyuk. And can I go ahead then?
Sure, yeah. It's, this is your opportunity to tell us why you want the variance approved.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for coming today. I know it's important after a big holiday to be here. Also, the reasons that I would like to present to you, number one, it was really the honest mistake. And I tried to communicate it with Mr. Bill. There was a gate post that had orange ribbon on it, and that's what I went off. And later on, we discovered that there is actual stake, which I could not see because it was in bushes, covered by leaves. That's the first time we discovered when inspectors came out on the initial call. So if we would go of that post with the orange tape, I would be fine, because that was, you know, the property would fall within the reason of 5 feet. Second of all, I understand that my immediate neighbor sent a letter and he consented because the building's been constructed over his driveway and it's not going to interfere with anything that, you know, on his property or anything like that. Also, at some point I came out when Adam was in charge of this case and developing it. I came out and I did my research in the back room at the Register of Deeds to see if there is any setbacks, and I discovered that that neighborhood was there since 60s and there was no restrictions at all concerning the setbacks. So also I would like to consider the fact that I did come out voluntarily. Apparently somebody called on me. I don't know how to word it right, but when I came out to pull the permit, there was a note in the computer system that said that somebody complained about it, but yet nobody officially ever came out and put a stop work order on it. So in reverse, I mean, I'm trying to do the right thing after I realized I made a mistake, but also if there somebody already, one of the officials was there and saw this, why didn't they put a stop work order then? Because it could have been at any stage of constructing the building and I could have easily prevented the mistake.
Could you do me a favor and just say that one more time to make sure I understood what you just said?
Okay.
Just state that
When
one
I
more
came
time.
to pull the permit, after I realized that I need to legalize everything, when I came, the people at the permits office told me that they already had a note in their computer attached to my property saying that somebody already was there. But I don't know who it was. They definitely didn't talk to me, and there was no stop work order. In other words, no further action was done to this property. So I don't know if that was inspector, because they never disclosed the name of the person who did it.
And are you saying that if it would have been a stop order at that time, you would have been early in the construction process, it would be easier to adjust, you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure, it's much easier. But I don't know at which point somebody came out, and until now I don't understand why nobody issued a stop work order, because that's what they should have done. If they have a official note in official system, somebody should have acted on it, but nobody did. I guess, I mean, they do their job, but my point is I came to this voluntarily. It's not like, apparently there was some motion going on, but I was not aware of it. So, and I'm trying to solve it in the easiest and, you know, way possible for everybody and the most convenient. Also, when I was thinking about this, the building that I'm building, and I might show you even some pictures, it's very mixed subdivision because it's been there for so long. Most of the property is a mobile home. And those mobile homes have been there since 60s, and they probably were not even new mobile homes. So I can present few pictures to prove the case that even down my road, just in 4 or 5 houses, I have mobile homes properties that fallen apart. And I think with me building this building is gonna increase the value, which means more revenue to the county, but also it's gonna increase the value of all the other houses. So I think I'm doing good thing with this.
Can I interrupt here?
Yes, please.
You removed a mobile home when you started the house, correct?
No, it's still there.
It's still there. You're going to remove the mobile home?
Whatever they tell me,
Okay.
yeah. Just so you know, I own kind of lot and a half. I don't know if it's reflected in your paperwork, but somebody moved the property line, so I'm on lot and a half, and this new house that I'm building, it's actually on that half, right, half lot. But whatever's required of me, I will do there. Also, after I realized I had a problem, I started talking to my neighbors, immediate neighbors, and they were all very supportive. And I believe I have 2 letters to prove it, especially, I guess, my immediate neighbor, which, you know, the variance is on his property, you know, concerning his property line. If you drive around that neighborhood right now, you will find many mistakes or what's the word, where people broke variances and original HOA rules and things of that nature. So even prior to constructing my property, I asked someone who's somewhat my neighbor. He lives in the beginning of Port Bass, and he's been a resident for a number of years, and he also does a lot of construction in that area. And I know it's not official way to go about doing things, but I was not really aware of 5-foot setback. At the closing, I was provided with paperwork there. It said nothing about setback. Then when I inquired my neighbor, and it was probably my mistake because I relied on his unofficial information, but I know he built several houses and, you know, fixed properties in that area. He said, oh, don't worry about it, it's just 1 foot. But so that's the information that I started building my property with. Nothing that I tried to break the law, I just didn't have enough information. Also, as it was mentioned, there was no official HOA because the neighborhood been for so long. And I know if it was more newer or more upscale subdivision, I know HOA is very active in those areas. And I'm pretty sure somebody would definitely tell me something about it. But I didn't have that stipulation. I didn't have the luxury of someone telling me you're doing a mistake. Matter of the fact, none of my neighbors ever came out and told me that I was doing something wrong. But later in the game, I realized that somebody didn't like it. But until now, I don't know who it is, why they done it, why inspection department knew about me doing this, and yet they let me do it because it's almost in dry at this point. You know, I have roof, I have walls, you know, I have windows on the property that were supposed to get installed. So I don't know it's intentional or unintentional, but again, I want to stress that my standpoint, I still did it voluntarily. I came out and I wanted to make it right. That's basically all I could come up with. And if you would like to see some pictures of the neighborhoods, or I know you have pictures of someone holding the ruler. I have it on my phone where we can zoom in and see the inches, because what I've done after the fact, I pulled the string along the property line, and then I took a tape measure and measured it from the string to the closest corner and to the furthest corner, just to give you the idea where we at. And also, my roof has 16-inch overhang, so I don't know if that counts or not.
Does any board members have any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, now, staff, I guess it's your chance to comment on the applicant's comments and information.
The applicant's he has been very cooperative, as mentioned, in terms of trying to work with us to resolve this. The first time that planning knew about this was when application was submitted, I assume when the application was submitted through the Citizen Serve system for the variance request. So at some point, and I don't know if Vladimir, if you may have come by the office, I think a time or two, and talked to Adam to kind of to figure out where we were and how that relates to what time frame the building codes staff address the stop order. I just don't, unfortunately, I can't answer that question for you tonight. I'd like to, I am going to look into that a little further now that I've heard this, find out what the time frame was. At what point after codes was aware of the complaint was that stop order supposedly issued. I was under the impression stop order had been issued through this, in the Citizen Serve system online. And so these are all questions that he has raised that I don't have a good answer for because I don't know. I just know our role had to do with addressing the variance request once it hit our desk, because we knew the building was already there. We knew the building was already there, and that, as I told you in the staff report, that the building permit had been issued and all of that, and that we had reached a certain point. This had been discovered, and that led to where we are now. But the precise sequence involving codes and the questions that he raises are things I don't have an answer for. It is certainly true that the process should be quite precise and streamlined, and there shouldn't be any question about sort of the step-by-step process and the flow chart, if you want to call it a flow chart, that would be involved in addressing a problem once it's recognized by staff. I don't know if codes staff in the field actually does any measurement on setbacks. And our staff is generally not in a position to do it. If we were, for example, if someone were putting in footers or digging footers and they were at a certain point, in some jurisdictions you'll have a call for staff, either a code staff member, planning staff member, to go to the site, check those setbacks to be sure they're accurate, or even before that, by staking it properly, and then staff would go out, measure from those stakes, and ensure that where the applicant's going to place the structure falls within the standards of the setback requirements. Since I've been here, I've not seen a system format of that sort used. Well, I'm not sure I can answer your question. If our staff were instructed to go do that, we would be doing nothing but that. We'd be in the field all the time. We wouldn't really get anything done. So I can see the concern about, is the process as cohesive and accurate as it should be to ensure against a problem in the field? I think those are questions that we could be glad to explore. And
So it's
see
part
where
of
that leads us.
getting the building permit, he did not have to have a new survey.
You have to provide a site plan. And the site plan presumably shows the setbacks, right? However, the problem with the site plan is it's not precise unless it's a survey, done survey and is done precisely.
But that's not a requirement to get a building permit.
Oconee County does not require a new survey to get a building permit for new construction. That does complicate it in the sense of making it more difficult to be certain about the accuracy, especially if you're talking about an accuracy within, a foot or two. Some jurisdictions give administrative staff a little bit of latitude and somebody's off by 6 inches or a foot or whatever to say, you're this percentage off, and there's an administrative ability to approve those cases in some jurisdictions, not everybody, some, so that to avoid that kind of problem where it's a close call. But the big thing is that we do not require a formal new survey showing the structure and its location on site. It could change in the field, we understand that. And that's one reason why I think there's a, in addition to the cost of doing a new survey. But at some point, the question is, at what point in that process do you field check those setbacks to ensure that the applicant doesn't get too far into the process that it's almost too late to turn back? So, those are questions that I think he's raising.
The applicant stated that when that subdivision was built in the 60s, that there weren't any control-free or any setbacks or requirements. Should that play in at all in our decision-making for something today?
I don't know if there's anything in the code that would indicate it, only because these are existing lots, but not existing structures. However, it does indicate that what you have is fairly small lots. Actually, some of them very small lots. That does complicate the business of building within the current standards. So it's not uncommon in such circumstances to get variances for those situations. In thing though that you like to see happen is that those issues be addressed up front before the applicant has already got a building on the ground. But it is true that it was, you're right, platted during a time when none of these regulations were applicable. And it is also true that it's a very mixed area in terms of development, the quality of development, a lot of mobile homes, as well as there may be, for all I know, some substandard housing out there. It definitely is not, kind of thing you would see today if you were to plat a new subdivision, even in the control-free zone, as you know.
And if we give this,
Then you would still have standards that did not apply at that time.
and if we give this variance, he's got to build it to code by today's standards.
That still applies regardless,
Okay.
because we can't, and you can't, give somebody a variance from the International Code standard requirements, so you cannot change that. He knows that, he has to build it to code. The only difference would be that
The only thing we're allowing him to do is encroach on the setbacks.
encroachment. The one thing that triggered this with the adjoining owner, that owner has now said he's okay with it. Now, as you know, his word doesn't determine the outcome here.
Right.
You still need to consider the criteria for variance, but For what it's worth, he is the adjoining owner who, I think, initially made the contact, if I'm not mistaken.
Was there a specific reason you chose that particular place to build your house? Okay.
Except for the fact, I wanted all, parking. Parking was the only reason because somewhat limited. I could have parking.
Limited because of the lay of the land?
Yeah, because I have, my wife is oldest of 13. That was, and so I tried to move it as far as I can, but not aware. If you let me, I can show you a picture where I can zoom in. I'm literally the edge, the post, the edge of the building, 46 inches, and we're talking about 5 feet. That's my closest corner of the building, only 46 inches. Around the string, and I'm not talking getting deep into it. It's just
Actually, the numbers we came up with based on what you submitted was 2.5 feet, but that's because of the overhang.
yeah, because of the overhang.
And the overhang does count. I think you'll notice, and you can't really tell it so much from the parcel map that we put in your packet from the assessor's office, but if you look at those lots, they're very small. That lot is 0.2 of an acre. I don't think you have it combined with another one. One lot.
Well, at the closing, attorney said, he said, I don't know if you know this, but you have kind of like a little bit over a lot. But it's already shown like as a whole lot. From original, they added a little bit to mine, split it between me and my neighbor.
Now, there are options. I mean, one option is to look at, try and acquire a strip of land from the adjoining owner to eliminate the encroachment, but lots are so small, that's probably not viable.
Okay, so I guess you have an opportunity for a rebuttal based on what has been presented by staff. Is there anything that you want to say?
Except for the fact you have to understand, I'm trying to work through this.
Vladimir, we need you to go back.
I'm really trying to work through this. I think it's important because I was very cooperative. I've been here 5 or 6 times. I live in Asheville, so it's 2-hour drive one way. Because I want to have this resolved one way or another, but because it's been a process, to build a building, and I didn't hire anybody, so it's a very slow process. It's been going on since the beginning of summer. We're almost at the end of the year, and apparently people been aware of it, but nobody done anything. And I'm coming from a standpoint where I'm trying to pull the permit, do everything right, and pay the taxes and pay all of my dues. So, but all the comments are correct. The streets are very small. I would justify me building as close as I can to the right, because there's no additional parking on the side of the road, because it was built by different standards, and the lot's very squeezed this way, and there's no parking on the sides of the road. So that was my decision why I'm trying to move it, somewhat to the side. But even I have one comment. When you first come to pull the permit, they gave me a photograph, like computer photograph, where I'm supposed to do my setbacks. And on that photograph, that's when I mentioned, when I measured my setbacks, I came out way over like 6 or 7 feet, because I was measuring from the post that was gate post. So I was not even aware at that point that I was doing something wrong. you know, because original application was done, and he can probably provide you with a copy of it, where I was way over 5 feet. And then when code officials came, they start looking, and somewhere in bushes, they found the true, you know, like pin, because it was there. My neighbor did actually survey. So it was not intentional at any point, and it is my best intention to solve it as quick as possible.
And we get that, we really do, so I appreciate that very much.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for the opportunity to speak.
Are there any opposition that wants to speak? Then we have unsworn public comment. So that's an opportunity for somebody to speak that, not sure what that is. F.
I think one of those emails suggested, I think it was one individual who posed it, said they weren't sure they'd be able to be here tonight,
Okay.
but they wanted to get.
Okay, for the board, are there questions that you want to make of staff or of the applicant? Okay, are we ready for a motion then? So I guess this will be a four-part, and my recommendation is that we handle each one individually of the four, unless there's disagreement among the board. Is that okay? We'll do each one individually. So the first criteria is that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to this particular piece of property. Can I have a motion to that effect?
I make the motion that we vote in the affirmative, that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property in question.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Maybe if you could describe what conditions are unique so that we could put that in record, just to.
That based on the small size of the lot and his choices of building, he chose that particular position of the location to build that lot, to build his house on that lot.
Okay. Any additional discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passed. Okay, the next criteria is that these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. Could I have a motion to that effect?
I make the motion to approve the request that the above, or the before mentioned conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion. Could you, like on the previous one, give some additional explanation as to why?
As stated previously, due to the conditions of the size of the lot, he had limited choices to build the dwelling, and he based the decision based on those.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried. Okay, the next criteria is because of these conditions, the application of this chapter to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. Can I have a motion to that effect?
I motion that we approve the variance request based on the lot restrictions, the size, and his ability to build, and the application of this chapter to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unnecessarily restrict the utilization of the property.
Any additional comments, discussion? Okay, all in favor, raise your right hand.
We need a second.
Pardon me? Oh, I'm sorry. I never got a second. Is there a second to his motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Now, any additional discussion? Okay, all in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried. And the last item is the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent uses or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by granting of the variance. Can I have a motion to that effect?
I make the motion that we approve the request because the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent uses or to the public good, and that the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of this variance.
Second.
Do I have a second?
Yes. No second.
Okay, discussion. Okay, all in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried. So based on the evidence presented to the board, do I hear a motion that the proposed variance be approved?
I make a motion that we approve the variance based on the passage of all four criteria.
A second?
Second.
Okay, discussion? Okay, all in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, the variance has been approved.
Chairman, before we proceed, would you mind taking a moment and let's go ahead and sign the board order?
Okay.
I don't think we need to stop.
Okay, so I guess the next, do we want to go back to
Yes, sir.
what was item 5? What is now item 6?
I'm not sure which number, but the item would be the,
It'd be
calendar for
item 6,
2018.
which was item 5 before.
it's, the item would be the calendar for 2018, the schedule. If you have it, that should be in your packet somewhere.
Oh, we do not have that.
No? No,
Do you not see it?
because we moved item 6 to the 5 position, so now I thought we still have the staff update to complete, don't we?
You're right, although I had an item number 3 in there that, just for the
Oh.
BZA meeting schedule
I skipped right over that.
for 2018. The only reason for that is to just review it with you to be sure that everyone's comfortable with that, and then have you formally approve it, and then we'll set it in motion.
Okay, my apologies, I skipped right over 3.
I have it on the screen if you don't see it.
So we need a motion to approve the
I would
calendar?
prefer that, yes, sir. As you can see, as usual, the December meeting is canceled for obvious reasons. And the other dates are in keeping with the usual fourth Monday, I guess it is. Unless there's some conflict with the holiday.
Do I have a motion to accept the calendar as presented for next year?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried. Okay, so now we're at staff update.
Yes, sir. I don't think I have anything on this on the screen. What you have in front of you, I believe I emailed you some of the correspondence that was going back and forth by email concerning the notification process and requirements for especially special exception cases like the cell tower request we had at the last meeting. And there were concerns expressed by a number of you about whether we should have an extended notification period. For example, I think Mr. Podner had indicated in his email that it might be wise to consider going to a 30-day requirement on the formal notification, which is right now the 15-day notification for publication in the newspaper. There were also, as you know, some interest in requiring more signs to be posted, and in the issue of how far from the center, from the radius we would want to choose to notify adjoining owners about upcoming cases. Podner covered a number of points in the email that you have there from him. The emails that I have there, I think behind the one from him, are between me and Mr. Gilster, and also David Root, the county attorney. I think that's page 2 in the second group of emails, where you'll see a reference to this is confidential communication, that sort of thing. Rather than to go into detail about, what he's discussing there, I would just say, you have that in front of you, and the concern that he had was primarily that they're currently in compliance with state statutes regarding notification requirements. And in fact, we're beyond minimum requirements for state statute for notification. There is nothing in state statute that requires notification of adjoining property owner at any distance. But we've been doing it. In addition to which, we've been doing it without it being in code. There's nothing in our code or in the rules of procedure that specify a requirement to formally notify by letter property owners in the vicinity. So that did create some confusion for the new staff members like myself when we came along trying to figure out where that came from, that idea. I know it was discussed by Planning Commission and others, but it's not in the books. And so I think Mr. Root had concerns about the need for additional notification, and also the fact that there's some additional burden that's placed on staff and on the county in terms of handling that process. There was also some discussion about possibility of having the applicants for cell towers to actually come in and discuss optional sites with staff, or actually, kind of process that would be used. In addition to which, there was some discussion again about a study that had been done some years ago that produced several sites that were considered to be possibly acceptable sites for towers by communications companies and by the county. That study, frankly, I haven't even been able to locate that study. I know it exists, but I do believe our attorney believes that it presents could be problematic, that it prejudges a case that might come across your desk, and that it might not be something you want to pursue as an option, in addition to which it would be extremely labor intensive. So I believe that was another one of the issues was, do we want to produce a document that essentially outlines favorable sites in the county? I know that's mentioned in the code actually, but nowhere have I been able to find the actual document from which it came. It was a study, I think, that was done by a consultant that produced 8 sites or something like that.
But if it was done more than 5 years ago, it's totally
I don't even know when it
useless.
was done, and I think the other concern we had regarding that was, you're kind of touching on it now, was the technology is so rapid and changing so quickly. How do we know what the needs are going to be a year from now, year and a half? There's new technology. There are these many towers, many structures that can go on power pole, on poles, and you see a good bit of that in the cities. So there's, it's a kind of a moving target that we felt might be very difficult to kind of, nail to the wall in that way. Having said that, the other options are that, the options about all of this are that if the board is truly concerned about moving forward with additional notification requirements for cases, the process would probably be best handled by forwarding that on to council or council member, either having, mention that to a council member, or even making a motion to ask council to research the matter, to pass it back to, because what they will do then is, if you go that way, is they will return it to planning commission to actually review and draft any language that would come out of it. And that would involve Mr. Root and myself in drafting the language that you're looking for. So I'm not giving you all the bloody details today, as you can see. A good bit of it is in these emails, as you probably read, in terms of the technical issues that were expressed and concern was shown about. But to my mind, if you want to pursue it, probably the route to go is to get council's involvement so that planning commission can take it on as a subject that they can draft some language for council and planning commission. I mean, planning commission obviously would have to approve that and pass it back to council for adoption, but a lot of the things you're talking about would have to be approved, would have to be in code. They wouldn't, it's not, the Root has explained that it's not good enough for those to be considered policy decisions. Those code generated. So that would require amendments to the
And I'm fairly new to this process, and after the last meeting, several of us were a little frustrated because we were trying to figure out what are the rules of notification for people, and how much notice do we give them, and how many signs, and then when we looked and we realized that, well, there really isn't anything in the code that tells us what that is, and then the question is that okay? Should we just kind of do it by the seat of our pants, or should there be a formal notification process that gives the public enough time and the people that are requesting the special exception enough time? So I think where we are, if I understand it, is Bill's kind of basically asking, do we feel that there should be some strength and some process in place in our code that identifies how are special exceptions handled? And so the question is, do we feel that there should be additional teeth to that, or are we happy with it the way it is? That's
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. Before we do get input on it, let me be clear on what I'm saying about what we have now. current statute, and it mirrors the state statute, mirrors the state planning enabling legislation, is a 15-day notification requirement in a local newspaper, right? That's in print. We also post it on our website as well. The other aspect is, one that comes to mind at the moment is the requirement for signage. And I know that's been a kind of a sore spot for a lot of folks, and I do understand why. The current standard and the requirement, again, coming down from the state, is one sign. If you only have one frontage, only one sign's required. You had two frontages, if the property had two frontages on a road, public road, two signs. But there's nothing in the statute that says every 1,000 feet, every 100 feet, or you've got to have at least 5 signs. That's nowhere to be found.
And are you saying that's state regulations or county?
In the state enabling legislation, it's broad enough that it basically is saying, yeah, you've got to provide that notification on site in a local newspaper. You post it. You also post these meetings out front at least 24 hours ahead of the meeting. But there's nothing in the statute that requires more than that. There's nothing that requires notifying adjoining property owners. Now, I know that surprises a lot of folks. And I have not done the research on it. We can do that if if there's an interest in it, on how many jurisdictions around the state do notify adjoining owners and nearby
I don't
owners.
understand why we
I
would
really
even
don't
want
know.
to.
I'm
I don't
sorry?
understand why we would want to if we don't have to. Because it opens up liability on the county if you notify the guy that sold it last Friday and the meeting's this Tuesday. Then you haven't notified the owner of record.
Well, that's another point about the notification of adjoining owners. Somebody had suggested, it had been pointed out that, well, we didn't get the notice soon enough to mount a defense or, whatever. Well, the fact that they got a notice at all was above and beyond what we were required to do. So, yeah, that's another good point is, well, how soon do they have to get that notice before? It's only 15 days in the newspaper. How would you set a standard for when they have to receive their mail notification? So I'm not trying to discourage you. I'm trying to point out the issues that staff and the county attorney have seen and kind of reviewing the concerns that were expressed.
The way I see it is if you do anything beyond what the state requires, then you're putting the county in a liable situation. Because you miss notifying somebody, then they're gonna come after us. If you notify the wrong person, there's always gonna be complaints if they didn't get notice in time. We could give them 60 days notice and they'd want 90 days notice.
Yes, if you codify it, we've got to be on the money. There's no doubt about it.
And you've got state regulations, and if we follow those, we don't have any problems. But
Not
when-
with the state, you don't.
Well-
Yeah. You may have with some citizens, I don't know, but I'm not trying to
If
take,
there's
I'm not trying
nothing-
to take one position or another here.
But if there's nothing in the county that regulates it, and we follow state guidelines, we're covered, right?
Correct. Correct.
But I think we're in business to try to do the right thing. If we felt, and I'm not saying we do, but if we felt that the state requirements are not sufficient to notify people, to give them a chance to know about what's happening in their neighborhood, the right thing to do is to bring that to council and say, do you feel that way as well? If you don't, it's a dead issue. If you feel that there should be additional notification, they'll then request planning commission to act on that and then come up with a recommendation to them. So I think that's kind of where we are. Is there room for improvement on what we have, or are we happy with it? If there's room for improvement, do we want to ask county council for to hear that.
I think another point about where we are is that historically, Mr. Codner and others may be able to address this better than I because they were here. There may have been an assumption by a lot of folks that this requirement existed about notification of adjoining owners because, well, we were doing it. It was being done based on some comments by planning commissioners, or it was kind of a request that was put out there to staff to do it, right?
So what happens
Which is
if,
fine, but there's nothing on paper to say that. So at the very least, it might not be, it certainly wouldn't hurt, at the very least, for there to be some clarification done on this, because a lot of citizens are gonna, may assume that it's there. And maybe at the very least, some clarification needs to be made about what the code actually says and
even
what it
though-
ought to say.
even though it's not codified,
Yeah.
the precedent has already been set,
It,
correct?
it has, but, you know, I would defer I would defer to the county attorney on that as to what that means to us. I get the impression that,
Well,
it doesn't set us up for, you know, litigation in all likelihood, but I don't know. I'm not an attorney. My only thought was, at the very least, it would be very helpful for us to get clarity as to what the intent is.
Let me recognize
it's
Mr.
not.
Codner if I can. He wanted to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jim Codner. I've been watching the affairs of the Board of Zoning Appeals for a number of years now. And as I've said in some of my correspondence, there's been a few instances where it was obvious the public that was interested in what was going on had insufficient notification. And the issue for me is, when you have a special exception hearing, that's special. It's not something ordinary. It's not in the ordinary course of business. It's something special, and it's an exception to what folks would really expect to be allowed in their area. And it could be of very high interest to them. And I think we owe it to the community. We, you, the administration, owe it to the community to get people involved and let them know what's going on so that they can come in and express concerns or express support. You know, cell towers, you just did a cell tower request, and you obviously had some people for and some people against. And we should not be looking at state minimums. Yeah, there's a minimum. Put it in the paper. I mean, who reads the paper to get a notification for a special exception? One sign. In some cases, that does fine. In one case, the Stamp Creek cell tower several years ago, that was a sign in front of property, was down a dead-end road that no one ever goes by, and was totally ineffective. And you had people in several subdivisions saying, hey, there's a cell tower just appeared, and we knew nothing about it. Well, it's because there was one sign on a dead-end road. Previous planning commissions have made attempts at fixing this. At one point, they had in proposed standards going to council to notify every property owner within a quarter mile of the subject property. Now, I personally think that's overkill, and that's not called for. But I guess I go back to, I think the state minimums are just ridiculously inadequate. And we have an obligation to get folks involved in issues which really affect their existence on their property. So I'd support what Bill is saying. We ought to go to council and say, hey, there's a problem here. We'd like to work with planning commission and see if we can come out with something that makes sense for the county. Should not be terribly administratively demanding, but at the same time, something which will allow folks to know what's going on in their area. So,
Thank you.
that's my driving. Thank you,
Thank you.
Bill. Thank you.
Mr. Codner made a good point about special exception, and I think that maybe that's the focus of what the interest is in this. Again, it would be another question that would have to be posed or could be posed to the attorney. And that is, would it be appropriate to limit these new requirements just to special exception requests? Or just a special exception request for communication towers? I think the question then would become whether or not you have an equal protection problem. And I don't know the answer to that. I'm throwing out the questions, which we could certainly pass along to the, you know, those that are in the know and get some of these answers. And that's what the board would like us to do, and see if we can get a little bit more clarity.
I think sounds like there's two actions that are being requested of us. One is, do we want to change to the notification process? And if the answer is yes, do we agree that let's have council get briefed on that to see what council wants to do? If council wants to take action on it, or if council wants to say, no, we're happy with it the way it is, and then it's dead. So, just as a, maybe if each one of you could just kind of state, what's your feeling of need that we want to make some kind of a change to the notification process?
Ask the planning commission for help on it. Chairman.
Pardon me?
I think we'll ask the planning commission for help on this.
You mean the council will?
The planning commission,
Right.
I think we'll ask them for their input.
Do you feel that there's, I guess as a board, I'm trying to get a sense of, do we want to do something with this and to kind of push this up the hill to the council, or do we want to just leave it the way it is? That's what I'm trying to get a feeling for.
I don't think giving the notice of one sign is gonna be sufficient to get the public involved. Look, do you see the press here? I don't see the press here tonight. So is there gonna be nothing in the paper about the question? So I think, there have been times before where, you know, the only thing that people appeared to respond to was a sign. And there's insufficient signage that advertised something that was going on wherever it was that we were discussing. I don't remember. But, I don't think too much notification is, I don't think too much notification is too much.
Okay.
I kind of see all or both sides of this issue. That our job is to create or have public engagement, and we need public input. How do we do that? As Mr. Codner had said, you know, with the Stamp Creek, one sign at the end of a dead end road that gets nobody going by it. How do we get the proper input from the community? You know, I know we've got to base our decisions on the 4 criteria, but I feel that I am here to serve the community. Flip side of the coin, I also don't want to create issues where we have gone. We don't need to do a lot of freelance work. That's not our job here on the BZA. We have to act within the parameters set forth by code and by statute. That's not what we're here to do, is to create either one of those. It would be good to get some input from council, and if they put it back down to the planning commission, I think it's at least worth letting other people join in this discussion, because it does affect potentially affect a lot of folks in our community. If 15 days is deemed to be adequate, then I'm for 15 days. If they say it needs to be 30 days. But it's not our role here to decide on what that particular policy is.
Right.
I think with some of the issues that we've addressed, 15 days in the newspaper's probably been pretty adequate. Then again, there's other instances where it probably has not been adequate. So getting additional input, I think, would be at least a good course of action for us to consider.
And I think that we need something as far as guidelines, and to follow those guidelines. Is sending out letters when there's nothing in the guidelines that says you're supposed to send out letters, then we shouldn't be doing it. If they want us to send out letters, then they need to tell us. It needs to be the adjoining landowners or the two adjoining landowners or adjoining landowners for a quarter of a mile, however they want to state it. But I think we need a guideline, and if they don't have it in there to send out letters, then there shouldn't be letters sent out. I mean, if you put a sign on a public road and the traffic doesn't see it or don't care enough to slow down and read it, it's their problem. And I think that a lot of controversy comes to this board when you notify people and they bring themselves and their ideas in, and some of it was not ideas that we could even consider. It was solely things to make us think the way they think, and it was outside our guidelines. And I think that if we're gonna do this, we need guidelines and we need to follow them to the letter.
Could I ask for a motion that we, well, how do I do this?
Good question, Mr. Chairman. I would suspect, and I can always kind of try to clean this up with the county attorney after the fact and see how he would like to take it from there. That maybe the motion to appeal to council to explore this subject and perhaps, as Mr. Medford said, to send it to the issue to the Planning Commission for review and possible development of new standards, notification requirements.
Could I have a motion to that effect?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion. Okay, I guess no discussion, let's go for a vote. All in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, the motion carried to bring this to council. Okay, so is there anything else on staff update that you wanted to review?
Not really tonight, Mr. Chair. As I think we mentioned, there's the updated comprehensive plan is finally getting some traction. We've got full staff now, and so we only have 2 or 3 elements of the plan left to finish up the drafts to move on to Planning Commission to give their blessing to and pass on to council for action. But then we have to start the process all over again here very soon, because 2020 is the next required major revision of the comprehensive plan. So that will be here before you know it. We'll obviously have to start that work well before 2020. But anyway, the good news there is that process has finally made some progress.
Okay, is there any old business? Any new business? Yes.
Adjourn.
I had an item on new business I wanted to.
Okay.
We heard tonight, I think we heard that a survey is not required for a building permit, and that whole issue of setbacks and how setbacks be measured, and makes me a little loosey-goosey. That wasn't, and made it sound like we're kind of exposed there, that we're gonna be holding people to setbacks, but yet we're really not measuring and managing that process. I don't know, were some of the rest of you uncomfortable with that discussion, or?
Very much so. And, you know, if you're getting a loan, which obviously he's not, mortgage companies require a survey, and then they require the foundation to be put on the survey to make sure all setbacks are met. So he's doing a cash house, which is unique, but still, I think that we all should have to follow the same standards. I think we should all be equal, and I think that's something that should be addressed. I think a survey, and then before anything is done, as far as woodwork or building the house, when the foundation's in or the footers are in and you can see where the house is gonna be placed, then the surveyor should have to come back and make sure that all the setbacks are met. It's easy to move concrete, it's not so easy to move a whole house.
there are various ways that that process is done in different jurisdictions, but we have historically not required it. I mean, we required site plans, but we've not precise survey.
It's very inexpensive to build in this county. And a survey, we're not talking $500. I mean, it's $400 to do a lot, it's another $100 for them to come back and draw the house in. So we're not talking a burden on somebody building a house. And in today's case, if he had had a survey and done what he was supposed to do, he wouldn't have had a stop order and his house probably would have been finished by Christmas. So, you know, when you look at the cost to the county for us to have a meeting, the cost to him for the time that he lost on the job, $500 to have a survey and a site plan is not too much to ask. It's not an undue burden for somebody investing in something like a house. We're not a county where it costs $80,000 to get permits before you can turn over the first shovel of dirt. So we don't require environmental studies, but I think that we must come up with a way to require a survey, especially in areas where there is not an architectural committee ruling on it.
If it would be of help, I could do a little, speaking of surveys, a survey of some other jurisdictions, state and the process they require. Take a look at the most common approaches, and
I think it's something that needs to be
I think
addressed.
that will come in. I have seen issues in Anderson County, for example, where setbacks that were off by much less than this ended up problem. Because it wasn't in this kind of neighborhood, it was in these pretty heavily controlled neighborhoods, but they ended up with massive problems. They were only off by a tiny bit. But that was because you had pretty heavily controlled communities that were both zoned and HOAs and tight standards. And the county was involved in inspecting those as well. And if they
But
made a
we don't
and if
have,
they made a mistake, they heard about it.
but we don't have that many neighborhoods that have those controls.
Right.
We have too much rural property
Right.
that, you know, it needs to be addressed.
I think one thing that you'll see in a lot of rural counties that I've seen is that there tends to be a lot of latitude given when you have large tracts of land or large parcels where, say, somebody's building a house in the middle of a large parcel, and it's obviously not going to be an infringement on a setback or even an easement. And they kind of say, well, that's pretty obvious. We'll, just a drawn site plan's good enough.
But that's not a
So, I'm
2/10
just-
of an acre.
I'm just telling you, yeah, right, exactly. I'm just telling you, these are, you know, you see those differences in the way these things are viewed based on where you are sometimes.
I mean, I may be naive, but it seems to me that if we're supposed to uphold the setback requirements and we don't manage it and we don't measure it and we don't, you know, verify it, I mean, we have something that we're not really concerned about.
No, when you have a lot that deep, this time, these really small lots, it definitely does,
Yeah. Well-
another option would be to consider another text, you know, again, text amendments whereby you would say, because these were platted well before zoning, all bets are off. Do whatever.
Well, there's areas around Charlotte that's, you
Yeah.
know, if it was platted before
Right.
zoning, then it's a 0 lot line.
Right.
But that would be too broad for this county to adopt.
I'd be glad to look at this and kind of report back to you. Planning Commission's got a good bit on its plate right now, but as a staff member, I don't have a problem doing a little digging, and we can kind of come up with some of the typical, you know,
Well,
systems
we'll
that are
give you the
used.
whole month of December. We're not having a meeting, so you got an
I
extra
got
30
all
days.
of December. I got nothing going on. I'm just getting ready for Santa Claus. I got nothing else to do.
So, we're gonna give you an extra month to work on this.
Well, enough said, and appreciate your willingness to look at it. It just seemed like there's a gap there. that
Well,
there's
it is something that, as you say, you regret to have something like that occur because of just what we discussed, which is the cost and time for staff, for you guys, for the applicant, time and money. And so
Well, when you put a
want to get it
stop,
right.
when you put a stop order on construction, that is a lot of money. And he could have saved himself everything for $500.
Okay, is there any other new business? Can I have a motion at the end of the day? A motion to adjourn. Can I have a second?
I guess I'll second.
Is there anybody against it? All in favor, raise your hand. Thank you.
Discuss that.
No discussion.
Thank you all for sending it up to council. One comment.